Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and it is pouring outside, which means it's the perfect day to spend some time in the kitchen and do some fun baking. I was scrolling Instagram as one does, and I came across this recipe that I knew I had to try, and that is cinnamon bagels. It's a Panera cinnamon bagel copycat recipe that uses these cinnamon chips. And as soon as I saw that recipe, I went ahead and I purchased these chips from Amazon, and I knew I had to try them. But we're not just gonna make one bagel recipe, because by the time I started researching bagel recipes, there were so many delicious looking ones I needed to try. We are gonna be making 4 today. The 4 we're gonna be making are the cinnamon bagels, cheddar jalapeno bagels, blueberry bagels, and a plain bagel. We're gonna start with the plain bagel today because it takes the longest to rise. And I'm gonna make all these bagels in my Bosch mixer. I will link this mixer along with the recipes we're gonna be making down below. So the first thing we're gonna do to make these plain bagels is add water to our mixer. To the water, we're gonna add our active dry yeast, and 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. And we're gonna use the dough attachment to mix this. Now we're gonna let this sit for 10 minutes while the yeast activates. This recipe says you can use active dry or instant yeast. If you're using instant yeast, you would go ahead and skip this blooming step. You would just start adding your flour now, but I'm gonna be using active dry for all these recipes. So I'm gonna be doing this step for all 4 recipes, where I will let the sugar, the water, and the yeast sit for a few minutes before we start adding the flour and all the fun mix-ins to make the different flavors that we're gonna be making today. While we're waiting for our yeast to bloom, I'm gonna prep some of our mix-ins for our jalapeno cheddar bagels. And I'm gonna have some slices for decoration on the top, but we're not just gonna decorate the top with the jalapenos, we're also going to add jalapeno pieces into the actual dough itself. So I think I wanna put 3 jalapeno slices per bagel. And then the rest of this jalapeno, I'm gonna go ahead and dice up. And I'm gonna take the seeds out. For the cheddar cheese that we're gonna mix in, I want little chunks of cheddar cheese. So I'm actually gonna cut the cheddar into blocks. And I chose an orange cheddar because I really wanted the cheddar color to come through in the final bagel. We do need some cheddar cheese for the top. After we put our jalapeno rounds on, I want to sprinkle it with cheddar cheese so that it turns golden brown and it keeps the jalapeno on top of the bagel. So I'm going to go ahead and shred up some cheddar cheese as well. Here we go. Now that we have this done for our cheddar bagels, we can go ahead and move on to putting the rest of the ingredients in just the nice plain bagel. I'm using bread flour for all of these bagel recipes. And so now I'm gonna add 4 cups of bread flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, this has been kneading for a good 6 minutes now, and it's feeling nice. So we're gonna go ahead and get this actually out of this bowl because we're gonna keep making our dough in this mixer. One thing this mixer does phenomenally well is making bread dough. It doesn't bog down. I can actually make 6 loaves of bread in this mixer at one time, which is pretty incredible. So we've got our plain bagel dough here, and I'm gonna go ahead and just knead this a couple times just by hand to help bring it together. And then we're gonna get this in a bowl, a little bit of spray so it doesn't dry out. And we're gonna cover this and let this rise while we start making our other dough. The next dough we're gonna be making is our jalapeno cheddar one. Now, this is the only one out of the 3 that I'm making up this recipe, or I'm not fully making it up. I'm taking the base recipe of the plain bagel and I'm adapting a few different recipes I found to make one that I wanna make, because I couldn't find one online that was exactly what I wanted, so we're just gonna make this one up using the plain dough recipe as our base. So we just started with brown sugar and water, and now I'm gonna go ahead and add my yeast. Oh, would help if the mixer was in there. I'll let that sit. One of my best friends, when we were in college, she worked at a bagel shop, or maybe it was high school. I can't remember. She may have been in college and I may still have been in high school because she's 2 years older than me. But she worked at a bagel shop for many, many years. And at the end of the day, we've been friends since we were 5. And so the years kind of blurred together. But at the end of the day, she would get to bring home tons of bagels. So whatever they didn't sell for the day, she got to bring home a bunch of bagels. And so we would eat bagels all the time out of the freezer, and they were delicious. And when I was reading all the different recipes, a ton of them say that bagels freeze really well, and I have firsthand experience that bagels freeze really well. So whatever we don't eat, I'll just throw in the freezer and we can pull those out, toast them up, make bagel sandwiches, have them for breakfast, whatever it might be. And so I'm just excited to have a lot of bagels on hand. So this has been sitting here now for a little while. So now what I'm gonna do is mix in our flour, our cheddar cheese chunks. You know what, I probably shouldn't have put those in there until after we needed it, but it's too late now. And our jalapeno chunks. I was a little worried that the cheese was gonna get mixed in too much, but it's holding its shape, so that's good. So we're just gonna knead this for the 7 minutes. So the cheese is getting mixed in just a little bit, but I think it's gonna be okay. And now we can go ahead and take this over to our other counter. I'm gonna finish kneading this by hand again. And we're gonna let this one rest right over here. We have now made 2 of our 4 doughs. And I think what I'm gonna do is go rinse this out because it has a little bit of cheese and it could have some jalapeno flavor in it. And I don't want that in my cinnamon bagel or my blueberry bagel. Our first 2 recipes were basically the same base recipe, and our next 2 recipes are basically the same base recipes, just different mix-ins. We're gonna start again with 1.5 cups of water. Now I'm gonna add brown sugar and our active dry yeast. Now we're gonna let that sit. So for the blueberry recipe, it calls for both frozen blueberries and dried blueberries. And it actually calls specifically for wild blueberries, which I didn't really know was a thing until I saw this recipe. And I think the wild blueberries are a lot smaller, so they're gonna fit a little bit better in a bagel. And I went ahead and got both the dried and frozen, which I didn't know if I was gonna be able to find wild dried blueberries, and I was. So that's kind of cool. So this recipe calls for the same amount of water as the last 2 recipes, but we add a little bit more flour, and I think it's because we're gonna be adding frozen blueberries, which is gonna be adding moisture. So instead of 4 cups of flour, we're gonna be adding 4 1/3 cup of flour, plus possibly another 1/4 cup. Now I'm using bread flour for all of these recipes, but you can substitute all-purpose if that's all you have. All of these recipes say in the notes section that you can substitute all-purpose. I have found that when it comes to making bread products, you get a nice, better chew from your bread products when you use bread flour, but you can substitute all-purpose. It just doesn't have as much gluten in it, and so it's not gonna give you as much of that like chewy texture, especially for a bagel, I think, that you want. But in a pinch, homemade bagels with all-purpose flour, I think probably would still be pretty delicious. Now we're gonna add 1 cup of our frozen blueberries before we start kneading it. According to the recipe, I looked at that 3 or 4 times to make sure I was looking at that correctly. So this dough is definitely going to turn purple. Then we're going to add a 1/2 cup of dried wild blueberries. Oh yeah, it's already turning purple. This has been kneading for a few minutes now, and I can tell that it's way too sticky. So I'm going to add our extra flour now at this point and let that go and see how that looks in another few minutes. So this is already starting to look a little bit better. It's starting to come together. I do think it needs just a touch more flour. And then we're gonna let this go. I think that might have just been what it needed. I almost forgot the salt. So this is really starting to come together. It's definitely nice and in ball shape. And I can just tell you that this smells incredible. But I think I'm gonna let it go for a few more minutes. So one thing that's super interesting that's happened with this dough is there is no more frozen blueberries intact. They are completely worked into the dough. Look how beautiful that dough is. This dough is unlike any dough I have ever made before. Let's see if I can get this off. Maybe I will just take the dough out. You know, that's still... I was thinking I would add a little bit more flour, but I think I'm just gonna let it knead a little bit longer because I don't want it to be a dry bagel by the time it's all said and done. So I'm gonna see if I can get a little bit more gluten development out of this dough, and then we'll let it rise. If I can get this back in there. There we go. Making bread in this mixer is a dream. It does not take much for the machine to knead this. This has probably been kneading for about 15 minutes now, and it is perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this out of the mixer. Oh, it's pretty sticky still. I don't think I wanna add any more flour though, because I don't want it to be dry. I say that, but I'm gonna go hand knead it a little bit with a little flour. So I'm just gonna hand knead this until a nice ball forms. It is definitely sticky, but we basically added almost a cup of moisture because of those blueberries that were frozen, and those have completely dissolved. I think that's all it needed, was a little bit of hand kneading to get that to its final dough. I've got a bowl here. I can't seem to find my spray. It walked off on me. So I'm just gonna put, that was a little more oil than I needed in there. So what I'm gonna do is get my other bowl out because we have one more dough to make. So I'll put a little bit of that oil in here. Cover that, and we're gonna let this rise while we make our final dough. I'm gonna go rinse this bowl out one more time and my kneading attachment one more time. This doesn't need to be perfect, but I do want to get some of the kind of bigger pieces of blueberry off. This is only the third time I've ever made bagels. The first time I was probably 10 or so, I don't know. It was a long time ago. And they turned out terrible. They were, when we boiled them, they shrunk and were flat and chewy, and not chewy in a good way when you think of a bagel, but they were awful. And then last time I made them, I made just the plain bagel recipe, and that was probably 9 months ago, and they turned out wonderful. And we put different toppings on. I think I put sesame seeds on some and everything but the bagel on some other ones. So my third time, why not try 4 different recipes? So now we're gonna go make our cinnamon bagel, which is the one that inspired this whole entire bagel extravaganza. This is the first recipe to call for 2 cups of water instead of 1.5 cups of water. I want this water to be about 95 to 100 degrees. Brown sugar and our yeast. And we're gonna let that sit. The reason we need our yeast and water and sugar to sit for a few minutes and kind of bloom is active dry yeast has a little coating around each granule, and you need that to dissolve so that it can rise properly. Instant yeast does not have that outer coating, and each granule of yeast is smaller, so you don't need to pre-proof your yeast in your water and sugar. You can just add it in with your flour and go on from there. But we do need to take this step because I don't have instant yeast. So now that our yeast has sat for the correct amount of time and it's looking bubbly and beautiful, we're gonna add our flour. Now our cinnamon chips. I had never heard of these before until I saw that reel. I don't think I've ever noticed them in the store either. Clearly my scissors are not very sharp. Let me grab a knife. And I reread the recipe just to double check, and we are supposed to add the cinnamon chips in with the dough before we knead our dough. So basically they just look like chocolate chips, but they're cinnamon. Last but not least, to balance the sweetness, we're gonna add our salt. This recipe does call for white chocolate chips that are chopped up into small white chocolate chip chunks or pieces. Josh and I are not big fans of white chocolate, and so I'm gonna skip that. I'm just gonna put the cinnamon chips in this recipe. This recipe gave a range of flour. I started with the very low range, and I can already tell it's gonna need just a little bit more. This dough is so beautiful. I think I'm gonna go ahead and call that done in the mixer, and then I'm gonna pull it out and we're gonna finish hand kneading it. That seems to work pretty good. I'm just gonna put a little flour on my hands. Oh yeah, that feels beautiful. Absolutely perfect. This is the bowl that I put a little bit of oil in earlier. Get that rolled in that. We're gonna get this covered, and we've got our full lineup here. Now that I have all the dough rising, I'm gonna take a second and just kind of clean up my mess. We do have a brown sugar topping we need to make to top our brown sugar bagels, but I will make that in just a second. First, I wanna go ahead and get all of this put away. These have started to rise beautifully, so I'm gonna move on and get some water onto boil. Bagels are a little bit odd in that aspect, in that you boil them before you bake them, and that's what gives you that signature chew that you want out of a bagel. So I'm gonna fill this Dutch oven up with water, get it on the stove, and then while that's coming to a boil, we still need to make our topping for our cinnamon bagels, and we need to start shaping our bagels. You know what, I think I'm actually gonna turn that water off, because once we shape them, the bagels need to rise for at least 20 to 30 minutes. So it's not gonna take that long for my water to come to a boil. For the cinnamon topping, I have 4 tablespoons of brown sugar. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of softened butter, 4 tablespoons of white sugar, and some all-purpose flour, along with some cinnamon. Probably should have grabbed a bigger bowl, but I think I can make this work. Maybe not. That's much easier. So I'm gonna mix this together until it's fully incorporated and kind of one homogeneous mass. I'm pretty happy with this consistency, so now we can start shaping some of our bagels. So I'm gonna start with the bagels that I started with first because they have been sitting and rising the longest. This dough is absolutely beautiful. Obviously, I made the plain ones first, so we're gonna start with those. You know what I should probably get out and put right here so that we can have our bagels rise on something? I've got 2 cookie sheets here. I'm gonna line with parchment paper. My dough. So each one of these recipes makes 8 bagels. So I want to try to have them as even as I can. I guess I could weigh them, but I don't think I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna make a log, and using my bench scraper, I'm gonna try to divide this dough into even sections. Now I'm gonna roll my dough just like I would if I was making a dinner roll. I'm using the edge of my hand and the edge of my thumb to push down on the dough, and I'm trying to get all of the seams worked into the inside of the dough. Now I'm going to puncture a hole in the middle, and that is our first bagel. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to tuck all of the ends into the center. I want a smooth ball at the top. All the ends pinched in at the bottom. Take my 2 thumbs, I think I'm going to do 3 across so that when they rise, they don't rise into each other. The smoother you make your first initial dough ball, the smoother the final product will be. When these rise, the hole is going to get a little bit smaller, so I need to make the holes, I think, a little bit bigger than I initially think I need to. My friend, if you have never made bagels and you now want to make bagels after watching me make bagels, let me tell you, this is your sign to go make yourself some homemade bagels. These are incredibly delicious. By far, probably the best bagels Josh and I have ever eaten. We do a taste test at the end, so you're going to know which ones are our favorite, and you are just going to see how incredibly delicious these end up turning out. Now, one thing to note, I am making the hole in the bagel, and I am not making this hole big enough. If you want a hole in your bagel, do make the hole bigger than you think it needs to be, because by the time the dough rises and it boils and it bakes, we don't have holes in the majority of the bagels that come out of the oven. But the way that we use the majority of these bagels is to make sandwiches out of them, except for the blueberry bagels and obviously the cinnamon bagels. But the plain and the jalapeno have been used to make sandwiches. And so if you want a hole, make it bigger. But because we're using them for sandwiches, we don't really mind that there's no hole. So just note,
I did not make these holes big enough for a hole in the bagel, but we don't mind. And I was a little worried that the jalapeños and cheese would kind of give me a problem with making the holes, but it's just as easy as the plain. And there is another way you can shape these. You can actually shape them into a log and then close that log. I did it this way because this just seemed like a much easier way to get the bagel to keep its shape, and so this is why I did it this way. But note, there is another way you can shape bagels if you want to shape them another way.
The two savory ones are now shaped, so let's shape the two sweet ones. The recipe said that these two would not rise as much as you would expect, which they did not rise as much as the last two doughs we just worked with. They didn't have as much yeast in them, but they do have a lot more sugar in them. This smells so good. I've never made a fruit bread like this before, and it smells incredible. It's a very, very soft dough. Both of these doughs are very, very tender. These doughs are definitely a different texture than the first two. I'm gonna just shape them the same way I shaped the last two.
We're going to do a taste test at the end where we're going to rate our favorite bagels, but I can just tell you right now that these blueberry bagels were incredible. It was so interesting how the frozen blueberries just dissolve into the dough. They create so much depth of blueberry flavor, and you not only have that, but then you have the dried blueberries that are giving you a nice chew and kind of pop of blueberry flavor. So yummy.
I am noticing that because this dough is a lot softer and more kind of, it's not stickier. You can see it's not sticking to my hands, but it's becoming a homogeneous mass when I shape it a little bit better. It's not wanting to stay, I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of like oozing back together, which is a good thing. There is definitely more sugar in this dough because of the sugar from the blueberries, so I don't know if that is part of it. You can see it just kind of like melts back together versus these doughs, they didn't want to do that as much. I just had the thought, it's gonna take a long time to get through boiling all of those bagels with just my one small Dutch oven. So I pulled out my roaster pan, and we're gonna use this as well. And we need the ovens preheated to 425 for all the recipes. They all bake at that temperature. So I'm gonna go ahead and preheat this oven to 425 and this oven at 425. And that way we can have two ovens baking bagels at the same time, and I can boil quite a few bagels at the same time. So probably by the time this comes up to a boil, our bagels will be ready to be put into the boiling water. I just added a half a cup of honey to this big pot and a quarter cup of honey to the small pot. And you can see it kind of on the bottom here. I need to stir this in and have this dissolve. The water is almost up to temperature. All the bagels are basically ready to go into the boiling water. I think maybe they could wait just a few more minutes, but I do have all the toppings ready. We've got our cheese and jalapenos. We need an egg wash for all of the bagels, so I went ahead and got that. That's just egg white and a little bit of water, and then we have our cinnamon sugar topping. This pot is obviously at a rolling boil, so I'm gonna turn that down just a little bit. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and start with these two. It said to turn it down to kind of a simmer. I'm gonna gently and very carefully put these in the boiling water for 1 minute on each side. I think I can fit 4 in here. Yes, 4 will fit perfect. I'm gonna set the timer for 1 minute. I think I'm gonna try some other ones next. These are the cheddar jalapeno. I think I can get 5 in there. I wanted to let my cinnamon ones rise just a touch more. That's why I switched to the jalapeno cheddar. Set a timer for 1 minute on that. This is almost ready. Definitely got a little bit more of a rise on these than the cinnamon ones. Look how puffy those are. Those look beautiful. I really like the recipe that I'm making out of the plain and the cheddar jalapeno. I just put plain bagels in the water that I just cooked the cheddar jalapeno. I wonder if this water is gonna taste like cheddar and jalapeno, and if that is going to affect the rest of my bagels. No, I was a little worried there for a minute. I guess it wouldn't matter because I've got all this water. I could cook all the plain ones if I needed to in that water. It's been 1 minute. I can flip those. I could have maybe cooked all of them in this smaller pot in the time it takes for that larger one to come to a rolling boil. I don't think I want to put my cinnamon and my blueberry bagels in this water. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and that is done. Let me get a lid on that. It is very steamy in here with all these pots of water going. So I am glad I decided to get this one going. These are the last 4 bagels that need to go into the water. I'm gonna do something that none of the recipes said to do, and that's just because that's what I feel like should be done in my gut. And I'm going to take the bagels off the parchment paper that I took them out of the water and put them on the parchment paper because it's pretty wet at the bottom here. And I'm gonna put that on a dry piece of parchment paper so that when I bake it, it's not sitting in all of that water at the bottom of the bagel. I don't know if this is necessary, but it feels like what I should do. So it's what I'm gonna do. And I have all the flavors intermixed. I'm gonna try to put the flavors like with like. 2, 4, 6, 8. Let's see, these need to flip. This is probably totally not necessary, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna dry my baking dish off. Now I'm gonna put my bagels back on my baking sheet. I'm gonna do that with all of them, but I need to get these bagels out of the water. Whew, I'm gonna turn the stove off. It is steamy in here. One thing I wanted to show you that I noticed, and this is a perfect example here, this is the plain recipe that I followed that I just added cheese and jalapenos to. I like how it puffed up, it held its shape. You can see these ones are a little bit flatter. I think these are gonna have a better texture, time will tell. So if I like the texture better of the plain ones where I added the add-ins, but I like the flavor of the cinnamon chip, I think what I could do in the future is just add cinnamon chip to this recipe. The blueberry one is a total different beast because of the blueberries in it. I could just add the dried blueberries, but I like the color. I think these are so beautiful, but they don't quite have as much height to them as you can see the plain. These are the plain ones over here. They're a little smaller because they don't have as much volume because they don't have the cheese and jalapenos in them, but they've got good height to them. There are so many factors that play into that. It could be how I did it, how I let it rise, how long I kneaded it, how much flour I added, how little flour I added. So that's just an observation that I made. So now I'm gonna cover each bagel with our egg white mixture. And these plain ones, this is the time where I could put any kind of topping on them I want. I could put just sesame seeds, I could put no topping. I've got some everything but the bagel seasoning right here that I'm gonna sprinkle on the top of these. And the cheddar jalapeno ones, we are gonna put our jalapeno slices and our cheddar cheese. I just played musical bagels with all these bagels until I could get one variety of bagel on each cookie sheet. I wasn't sure if they were all gonna have the same cook time, so I thought it would be smart to not intermix the varieties of bagels. And so it took a little bit of moving around the varieties, but we were able to make it work. They smell incredible. I cannot wait to try these. The blueberry are done as soon as we put the egg wash on it. They don't need anything else, but these 3 to the right of the blueberry ones do need a little bit more attention. So we'll start with these ones. We've got our cinnamon mixture here, and we're gonna top our bagels with this. This was another reason I wanted one variety on each, so that I wasn't getting the toppings on different bagels. Each topping would just be exclusively to the bagel it was intended for. We'll see if I did my math correctly earlier. Nope, I'm off by 1, but that's okay. wish you could smell it in here. It smells so good. We are definitely going to be having bagel sandwiches with these everything but the bagels seasoning bagels, because as soon as I started sprinkling that on the top of those bagels, I could smell the onion. Oh my goodness, it's gonna be so good. Bagel sandwiches in the summer, BLTs, all-time favorite. So we're gonna let these cook anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes. That was the range on these bagels. So I'm just gonna keep a close eye. In about 8 or 10 minutes, I'm gonna rotate them so that they bake a little evenly in the oven. These bagels are perfect. I cannot believe how beautiful they look. And I am happy to show you that I think the cinnamon ones, they did a nice oven spring. So they look absolutely beautiful. They did get a nice oven spring. They puffed up beautifully. I was a little worried they were gonna be a little flat. I think I could have made the holes in these blueberry ones maybe a little bit more pronounced. I'm gonna turn the oven off because there's not much of a hole in them anymore, but that's okay. They'll still taste really good. They look so beautiful. I do wanna get these bagels cooling. They feel like they've got a really good chew to them. Look at that, beautiful. They just feel like they're gonna be super chewy and delicious. I just called Josh in to do a taste test. I cannot believe how beautiful these bagels turned out. They're still warm, so it's gonna be the perfect time to do a little taste test. So Josh just got here and he is going to be our taste tester. Now, do you wanna just taste all of them? I kinda wanna taste all of them.
To start, they look amazing. I mean, look at that, the detail on this.
Thank you.
Wow, these must be the cinnamon ones, right?
Yes, he's pointing, if you can't see, he's pointing to
No.
the jalapeno ones.
Those are amazing.
Thank you. I think they look pretty professional. Now, one thing is, I think I needed to make the holes a little bigger because they kind of closed up, but.
I was wondering if they were holeless donut hole. No, holeless.
No, they had holes in them, but I just needed to stretch them out a little bit more. So we probably want to end with the savory, right? Or this is going to be super
probably.
Sweet.
Yeah, probably start with maybe the blueberry.
Blueberry. Okay, so I'm going to cut into this. Oh my goodness, look.
Wow.
Look at that. Good chew, it's cooked all the way through. And I've got butter out and I've got cream cheese. What would you like on?
I just want it plain to start.
You want it plain to start? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a little butter. Well, no, maybe I'll do plain too.
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect texture.
That is so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it needs butter or anything. If I were to pick one of the two, probably would put butter. It's really great.
It's chewy, which is what I like out of a bagel. My mom used to buy bagels at Winco. You and I have gone to Winco shopping many times. And they have a bakery. And they had these blueberry and raspberry bagels, but it was some gummy. It wasn't real blueberries. These are dried blueberries and fresh or frozen blueberries in here.
Great.
Really good. This is 100 times better than that. That was pretty good.
That was good. I finished the whole quarter of it, even though I was thinking I probably shouldn't, so I'm a little hungry, but.
Okay, which one do you want to do next?
Man, I could go for like another one of those.
Let's try cinnamon
Let's do
next.
cinnamon because the savory,
Okay.
we'll do that last.
So all that to say about the bagels from Winco is you would always be really excited when you got the berry bite, but if I make these, I could put even more
Oh yeah.
And
But it's also good balance.
it's good balance, yeah. Okay,
Wow, that looks great.
look at that. So the chips melt. So there were those cinnamon chips that you saw that I got in there. Do you want butter on this or just plain?
I think just plain.
Okay. So this is supposed to be like the Panera copycat recipe.
Well, I've never had the Panera original, so. Yeah, that's good. Very cinnamony. Wow.
Surprisingly, it's not as sweet as the blueberry one.
Not as sweet and not as
Chewy.
chewy. Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised by that. This had, all of them only had 1 tablespoon of sugar in the dough, but this obviously then had a bunch of blueberries added, which added sweetness, and then this had the chips and the cinnamon sugar topping on the top.
I don't think I'd want this any sweeter. Any sweeter would be a little much.
Yeah. So now, do you want to do the everything or the jalapeno?
Let's do the everything first.
Okay. I was thinking about making turkey sandwiches with cranberry sauce and pesto for dinner tonight.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
It sounds like a weird combination, but we love cranberry sauce, pesto sandwiches, and turkey.
Oh, look at that.
That looks,
Just your classic. I keep wanting to call it a donut, but classic bagel.
you know, I think I like these better than donuts to be. This is kind of more savory.
That garlic, onion, salty. Hit ya.
Probably one of the best bagels I've ever had.
That's great.
Wow, that is
This
really
with
good.
cream cheese too.
Yeah.
Risky business.
Oh yeah, I should put some on one. You kind of want that kind of tangy cream cheese with the salty, with the plain or the everything bagel seasoning. So good.
Yeah, it kind of cuts down on the saltiness too.
You can see how the cheese kind of oozed into the center, or lack thereof.
So this can be spicy.
It depends on if the jalapenos were spicy or not.
Definitely smell the fresh jalapeno.
It's pretty mild.
It's not hitting me. The cheese is kind of mild too.
You don't even taste really I mean, I didn't put that, I think I put 1 jalapeno in all of these and then each one got 3 slices. So you can taste the jalapeno, but it's not very strong.
Yeah, the flavor is mild
Yeah,
too, not just the spice, but the flavor.
that's what I meant.
It's interesting that seems like the most extreme flavor, and yet it's the most subdued actually.
That's a very good point. It's very mild compared to even the everything, because there's salt in the seasoning, everything bagel seasoning. This has definitely a very mild flavor. I wonder if I forgot to put salt in it.
I think maybe there's no salt in this.
I think I might have forgot to put salt in this.
Guess we'll have to watch the tapes, huh?
Yep, we'll have to look back. I think I'm gonna go back in for the blueberry.
The blueberry, I'll take the other half.
You want the other quarter? So out of them, rank them for me, would you?
Okay. Well, they're also good. They're just in different
They're different, yeah.
categories. I think for me, the blueberry is just really good.
Put the knife down. Me too.
Yeah, I feel threatened with the knife. Yeah, the blueberry just is just so good and so different.
Yeah.
But
It really reminds me of that bagel that we used to get all the time growing up, but definitely a more elevated, obviously, version, because it's not like fake gummy blueberries in it.
yeah, and without the bagel hole in the middle, so much more efficient in terms of spreading surface area.
I would say I'm not super upset about the fact that I don't have holes in them, because we're gonna make sandwiches out of the majority of these, and the hole just sometimes makes that difficult. But I'm very excited about this. Thanks for
Amazing.
doing a taste test.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
no
try it
problem.
with a little cream cheese.
Oh, yeah, I'll take a little cream cheese on this.
I'm gonna try a little cream cheese. So this is the new Tillamook cream cheese.
It's more cheesy, which is interesting compared to like most cream cheeses are just kind of like a textured cream.
The blueberry's my favorite. It's probably blueberry, everything, cinnamon, jalapeno. Because I think I forgot to add salt to the jalapeno.
Thanks, Sam.
You're welcome.